Real quick, YouTube. I wanted this to be a double header, like my other video. I had to cut it. I tried so many edits and tried to get the time down. There's just too much stuff to go over. So I ended it just abruptly cut it. Sorry. Enjoy. Betsy DeVos coming next. Alright, YouTube, welcome back. Thanks again for watching the video. If you haven't been following, this is part 2 of my deep dive into the cabinet, or Trump's cabinet picks, who he chose to represent the nation, basically. We try to figure out why he may have chosen some of these candidates. Now, the first person we're going to go over is the administrator of the EPA. He chose Scott Pruitt. I'll show you that. Now, the EPA is responsible for enforcing the nation's Clean Water and Clean Air Acts. Okay, that's their job. And he was supposed to head the organization. And now, why Trump chose him, it's really hard to tell. At least in any logical way. Or any logical reason. This man has no experience in the field. He's never advocated for the environment. He's never been on in any environmental agencies. But that seems to be kind of a trend that we'll see, although I'll show you guys throughout these videos. In the Trump administration, they choose someone who has absolutely no experience. They're like, here, do this job. And these are things that are, jobs they're dealing with, or jobs that involve the nation. So you're involving all 50 states, very complex issues within this job. It'd be different if it was an environmental job for California. It's just one state. It's a lot smaller, but you're talking about the whole nation. Okay. So. Trump ran, kind of side note, Trump ran on a campaign idea that someone who wasn't a politician was a good thing. And, in defense of conservatives, I kind of agree. It sounds good, but in practice, with Trump, with the way he's brought things to the table, it doesn't seem like it's working at all. But I like that idea. So I could understand why conservatives got behind Trump the first time. I can understand it. Kind of. But we need to make a huge distinction between someone who's not a politician and someone who has no experience in the field to which they've been hired. There's a massive difference between those two things, or those two ideas. You don't hire someone with no experience to be the CEO of your company. You just don't do it. Now, in addition, Scott Pruitt has shown time and time again that he has worked or sided with big corporations rather than environmental organizations. And he's even sued the EPA 14 times. Which is wild. You think about, you're going to pick a candidate to head the EPA. If you've sued the EPA 14 times, I would assume that would disqualify you from having or getting the position. But in Scott Pruitt's case, it didn't. And let's try to find out why it didn't. Let's first visit Scott's past. His tenure in Oklahoma as the Attorney General. Let's see. Now, one of the first things that we see, or how Scott Pruitt kind of got his name, is there was a huge legal battle, many years, in Oklahoma and Arkansas over chicken manure, and there were thousands of chicken farms, and they were using the manure from the chicken farms and spreading it on their land to fertilize crops and whatnot. And anything you put in the in the ground is basically, when it rains, it's going to get into the streams and the watersheds, and it's going to contaminate the water in the area. And it started in 2003. In 2005, as I said, it was a back and forth. It was a long legal battle. But in 2005, the state of Oklahoma actually filed a suit against these companies or these corporations. Let me bring it up here. I'm sorry. Some of those corporations included Tyson Foods, Cargill, and Simmons. And the complaint was basically that there were 2,300 chicken houses in the Illinois watershed, and the manure they produced was equal to the waste of 10.7 million people per year. So when we're talking about tons, and you see it in these articles, tons of chicken waste, we're talking literal metric tons, not a figure of speech. Now, Scott Pruitt, as the Attorney General, decided not to pursue the case, which may or may not have been the right idea, or the right decision, I should say. But when you start to see that executives of the poultry companies have paid money towards his campaigns, you start to see that that decision now becomes, starts to be questioned, and we start to question his decision. Why did he actually make that decision? Was it for, did he really want to do research for the environment? Is that the real reason why he decided not to act in the case? Or was it because he was getting money on the side and said, hey, let's just make this go away? Let me bring that up for you guys. As you see there, $40,000 was given to Pruitt's campaign in 2010. And this poultry lawsuit isn't the only example of Pruitt's litigation practices that seem to be influenced by these campaign donations. Okay, as we see here, as I said before, he sued the EPA 14 times on behalf of big corporations. And in 13 of those cases, co-parties to the co-parties in the lawsuit contributed money to Pruitt's campaign 13 times, or his affiliated PAC. So now, according to followthemoney.org, Pruitt has collected at least $345,000 over the years from oil and gas industry corporations. E&E News writes that Pruitt raised $282,000 from oil and gas interests during 4 of his state campaigns. That was an investigation they did. So, I mean, this is looking terrible for Scott Pruitt so far in his history. Okay, he's basically getting money from these massive corporations, and then he's basically going to bat for them as their own personal lawyer. Like, that's not how. That's not the Attorney General's job. Okay, you're not supposed to have an Attorney General who's basically on the payroll. And the issue with this, the main issue, is that it seems shady. Even if you did a whole bunch of digging, we found out somehow this is all not true. It's a shady practice to accept money for someone you're working for or you're representing. It's a conflict of interest there. Regardless on who's right, who's wrong, and should someone have been sued, and should someone have not been sued, this gives people the idea that, hey, if I just give Scott Pruitt some money, he'll fight for my organization. That's ludicrous. Okay. Now, give me a second here. This all happened prior to Trump hiring this guy. All those things that I talked about. This was in the news. It was well documented history of doing this. There's also other things that I could have brought in this video, but I'm trying to save time for you guys because I don't want you guys to have to sit through a 30-minute video. But there's even more things where the evidence shows that corporations drafted letters for him and sent them to his email, and then all he did was basically sign the letter and send it off. Like, absolutely ridiculous stuff. So, like, the level of coordination between the big corporations, and because he's supposed to be, he's the Attorney General of the state. He's supposed to be non-biased. Okay, the people bring their suits. It's like basically like a judge, like Judge Judy. This person brings his suit. He's suing this person, and we find out that this person got the decision in his favor, but he was slipping Judge Judy money the whole time that the court case was going on. Like, what? Anyway, so these two things happened after he was elected. I usually don't want to go into that because I usually want to figure out why Trump hired the person, what were the factors that were influencing his decision. But this stuff is just too good. Okay, we have Exxon, as you guys may know, huge corporation, huge oil corporation. They were given a hardship waiver by Scott Pruitt. Basically, he signed off on it. Okay, now Exxon in 2017 reported over $20 billion in profits. So they weren't hurting, plain and simple. Okay, this hardship waiver is for small oil companies that, if they followed EPA regulations, they would see drastic losses. May even have to close shop. It's just how to save. Basically, like food stamps for these big oil companies. For the ones that are suffering, not for the people who are making billions of dollars. And if this wouldn't have seemed so shady, if we didn't know that Rex Tillerson, the former CEO of Exxon, was also on Donald Trump's team. If you remember, he dropped his CEO status, or stepped down right before Trump picked him for that position as Secretary of State. So, I mean, he obviously still had billions of dollars invested in Exxon. And I don't know if he went back to Exxon after leaving or not, but when you have someone who used to work for Exxon and now you're giving them hardship waivers, it looks shady. I don't understand why Scott Pruitt would ever do that, unless he was purposely trying to look shady, or obviously trying to line his pockets with money. That's like the only other explanation. But that one was terrible. And let's see if we can get one more for you guys. Sorry. Alright, Scott Pruitt also decided to suspend the clean water rule for 2 years. Remember when I showed you the EPA is responsible for doing what? EPA is responsible for to ensure that Americans have clean air, land, and water. That's the EPA's responsibility. Okay? And Scott Pruitt decided during his tenure to suspend the clean water rule for 2 years. The rule was established by the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers. It expanded the protections for something that was already in effect of the 1972 Clean Water Act, which was there to protect headwaters, streams, and 20 million acres of wetlands. And it also held farmers and real estate developers accountable for the runoff pollution for streams that ran through their properties. So this was a huge, huge effort by environmentalists, by the EPA, to help keep our water clean. So to undermine that, especially when when Trump campaigned on having crystal clear waters, and how he continues to campaign that we have the cleanest water here in America, and it's obviously not the case. He's obviously suspending rules to protect drinking water, And unless he has a really, really good reason to do so, there's no reason to do it. Unless you're trying to help real estate developers skip out on some rules that would otherwise tie their hands or cause them to lose money. So, and I'm sure, I haven't done any digging, but I'm sure you can find a money trail for all of that. Allegedly.